This is not just another crime story. It's the chilling tale of Kevin, a man whose dark descent left a trail of terror. What began as whispers of a troubled youth soon spiraled into something more sinister, culminating in a crime so horrifying it left seasoned detectives speechless. The world watched in disbelief as the twisted details unraveled, shaking the very core of justice. A troubled beginning. Kevin Roby wasn't always the monster the world would come to know. At first glance, he seemed like any other troubled young man, growing up in a chaotic environment. His life spiraled from a young age, marked by a deepening sense of anger and confusion. He began to isolate himself, turning away from any form of help that was offered. But what nobody could have predicted was just how far his mind would sink into the abyss. People who knew Roby described him as a loner, someone who didn't fit in, who always seemed to be on the outside looking in. But there was more to his isolation than social awkwardness. There was something darker brewing beneath the surface, a fascination with the occult, an obsession with satanic rituals that began to consume his every thought. He'd spend hours devouring books on Satanism, convinced that he was on the brink of uncovering some twisted truth about the universe. And, in his mind, the only way to prove his worth to the dark forces he worshipped was through blood. By the time Roby was in his 20s, he had fully embraced his satanic beliefs. What began as a morbid curiosity had become an obsession. He believed he was a vessel for Satan himself, chosen to carry out the devil's will on earth. And soon, his dark fantasies would spill over into reality. The descent into darkness. Now, this is where things take a terrifying turn. As Roby's mental state deteriorated, his obsession with Satanism led him to believe that only through ritualistic murder could he gain true power. It wasn't enough to believe in the dark arts. He needed to act on them. He needed to kill. And he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. In the years leading up to his first known murder, Roby's behavior became increasingly erratic. His paranoia grew, and he isolated himself even more. But what really sent chills down the spine of anyone who crossed his path was the way he began talking about death. When people saw the signs, they dismissed them. It was easy to brush off his bizarre behavior as mere eccentricity. He's just into weird stuff, they'd say. But the truth was far more sinister. A horrific crime in broad daylight. No one could have anticipated the brutal crime that Kevin Roby would commit next. It wasn't just the act of murder. It was the sheer brutality, the grotesque nature of what he did that would haunt everyone involved. The first victim? An innocent man who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and who crossed paths with a killer who believed he was doing the devil's work. It was a sunny afternoon in Los Angeles. People were going about their day, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. Roby had been planning this moment for months, meticulously preparing his tools, his ritual. When he saw his victim, he felt the surge of power he had been chasing for so long. It was time. He attacked swiftly and violently, leaving no chance for his victim to escape. What made this crime so particularly horrifying wasn't just the murder itself. It was what Roby did after. The satanic symbols, the ritualistic mutilation, the chilling way he seemed to revel in the act. The ritual of death. After the murder, Roby didn't flee the scene. He didn't even try to cover his tracks. Instead, he performed a twisted ritualistic ceremony over the body, leaving behind signs that sent chills through the spines of even the most hardened detectives. When the police arrived, they were confronted with a scene straight out of a nightmare. Satanic symbols drawn in blood, the body mutilated beyond recognition. It was like something out of a horror movie, except this was real. The police were at a loss. They had never seen anything like it. The brutality, the symbolism, it didn't make sense. They couldn't comprehend what would drive someone to commit such a horrific act. And as they began piecing together the clues, it became clear that this wasn't just a one-time event. Roby had more plans. This was just the beginning. You would almost have thought prison was the end to Kevin Roby's killing spree. A place where he would finally be made to confront his crimes. But no, that only cemented Roby as one of horror's most sorrowful figures. Satan in a cell. Kevin Roby's first trial sent him to San Quentin State Prison in California, arguably one of the toughest assignments for criminals in the U.S. San Quentin was built to confine the most dangerous within its walls, but for Kevin Roby, It was more of a scenario than a prison. Roby felt no remorse, no regret. According to him, his mission wasn't even close to finishing. If anything, he thought prison offered him new victims for his dark rituals. In jail, Roby continued as if the rest of the world didn't exist. His convictions of Satanism deepened, and he made sure everyone he had around him knew that prison would not deter him from completing his mission. It was during this time in jail that he met his next victim, a man by the name of Luke, an inmate who had no idea he was living next to a man with a killing mind that was fully possessed by ritual delusions. Luke was another prisoner serving for his very own crimes, but unlike Roby, he wasn't prepared for the kind of evil lurking beside him. Roby carefully watched him, quietly making plans for the next sacrifice he decided would raise his standing in Satan's eyes. See, for in the warped psyche of Roby, every act of violence, every drop of blood, brought him closer and closer to the powerful satanic figure he had believed he was always supposed to be. And now, Luke is going to be his next ritual. The ritualistic killing behind bars. That night Luke died was going to be one of the darkest nights in all of San Quentin's history. Roby attacked Luke. He overpowered him in the dead of night, dragging his body to the floor. For Roby, though, it wasn't about killing. It was about the ritual. After Luke's death, Roby continues to mutilate his body, stabbing Satanist symbols into his flesh with a homemade knife. The room reeks of blood and death but does not have any impression on Roby. He is detailed and obsessive over every second, making sure his ritual is conducted to perfection. Not that it was a passionate outbreak of rage or revenge, it was a ritual. It was just another sacrifice to the dark forces guiding him. For hours he chanted over the body, speaking in tongues, calling down Satan to empower him. Smearing the blood across walls with different symbols, the cell became a scene out of a horror movie. But this wasn't any movie, this was real. And by the time the guards discovered the result, it was already too late. When the guards came, they found a scene so bad that many of them could not fathom what they were seeing. Their cell had been drenched with blood. The body lay in a twisted position, less than recognizable, as Roby continued his chanting. The world behind bars and beyond was shocked by the actions of Roby. That was not merely a killing. No, that was something worse. Worse than the thoughts of anyone within maximum security walls. Those were indeed the thoughts of nightmare haunting even the toughest guards. How could all that have gone wrong in the maximum security prison? How could such a ritualistic killing happen when all such violence is just meant to be prevented? The prison was flooded with questions, yet Roby didn't care. This was all part of his mission. A courtroom entranced with horror. By the time Kevin Roby faced trial for the murder of Luke, his name had become a synonym for evil. This was no ordinary trial, it was a spectacle. Reporters flocked into the courtroom curious to see the man who had perpetrated such brutal satanic acts behind bars. The public, horrified by elements of Luke's murder, wanted justice. But Roby? Roby showed no remorse. He went into that court with the same attitude he had throughout his killing spree around. The prosecution never minced words. They portrayed Roby as a man consumed by dark powers, losing all sense of reality, and they did not lie. This is said because numerous witnesses were testifying to the bizarre behavior of the man and his obsession with Satanism, letting it all culminate in calculated killings. These custodians, who had found the body of Luke, said, with vivid detail that left the courtroom in stunned silence, what they had seen. You could feel the tension in the air. This wasn't just a murder trial. It was a trial about something much darker. And Roby? He sat there, unfazed. To him, this trial was nothing but a formality. He believed he had done what he was supposed to do. He had done the will of Satan, and in his mind, that justified everything. There was no remorse and no cold detachment. It all added to the horror of the case. This wasn't just a man on trial for murder. This was a man on trial for believing he was an agent of pure evil. Roby's twisted defense. By the time it came to hearing Roby's defense, his lawyer was doing his best to paint him as a mentally ill man who'd gone out of reality. And while that wasn't too far from the truth, it didn't really do much for the jurors. They'd heard all about the specifics of Roby's crimes, the ritualistic nature of the killings, the satanic symbols, the cold calculation. Roby was a man who took the stand. Everything that he said had to add to the horror. He described the killings in detail, not as acts of violence, but as necessary rituals. He also considered himself to be anointed by Satan to complete all these sacrifices. Talking about his actions with a sickening serenity, he explained that this rite contained symbols, chanting, and mutilation, every ghastly detail, as part of a religious rite. Chilling were those words. Still listening in stunned silence, the jury did. It was only a matter of minutes before the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty, on all counts. But when the sentence was read, Roby didn't flinch. He showed no remorse, no plea for mercy. To him, he had fulfilled his purpose. And while he spent the rest of his life in prison, Roby felt he had accomplished something. The aftermath. Kevin Roby's case has left its scar on the criminal justice system forever. How could that be possible? Someone so deranged has gone unnoticed for so long. How can someone do what that man had behind bars? Questions were left out, but what Roby did will surely never perish from one's memory. The trial was over, but the fear, disbelief, and plain horror of what Kevin Roby did would not leave the ones who ran with that case. Even decades later, people still speak of the satanic killer, the man who thought himself on a mission from hell itself. Kevin Roby sits in prison, but the evil he unleashed continues to resonate within the nightmares of those who watched it. Behind the eyes of a monster. It is a fairly easy road to Kevin Roby, keeping one's mind fixed only on the horrific nature of what he does. But hold your breath for a little while and discover this man, this predator, what made him so willing to do such things as embracing the satanic rituals, murder, and unspeakable brutality. That is what lies in the twisted psyche of his mind, one so gone that to understand it is like trying to understand a world that does not exist. These are some of the psychiatrists who saw Roby in prison. They were shocked at what they found. In no conventional sense could be said that he was mentally ill. He was broken beyond repair, for want of a better phrase. His whole worldview has been defined by a belief system most people cannot believe, in an obsession with satanic worship, an entrenched and deep-seated belief he was chosen by dark powers to carry out rituals involving human sacrifice. And scary is that Roby didn't commit crimes for what could be considered some form of personal gain or out of wrath. He genuinely believed what he was doing was righteous on behalf of Satan. From an early age, Roby had been unstable. He grew up amidst a home environment that was harsh and violent, and it seemed as though this was something of an inevitability. It is not surprising then that by early adolescence he had fallen into this dark, occult lifestyle. At first, it seemed like one of those phases, the rebellious phase that would eventually pass. But it never passed. It festered. By the time he reached adulthood, the satanic views Roby was set on had taken hold of his mind completely. He came to believe that his main purpose in life was to serve Satan, do rituals that would give him power and immortality, and, ultimately, a place of honor in hell. Psychiatrists also diagnosed Roby to have the traits of narcissistic personality disorder. He perceived himself as above everyone else, which nurtured his hallucination of being chosen by dark forces. The norms in society did not apply to him. To him, homicide was not only permitted, but also required. The more he killed, the stronger he felt. That sense of power was a heady draft to a fellow like Roby, who had lived all of his life feeling powerless. Even worse, however, was that so soothing was Roby. He behaved quite calmly in the face of his trial and of being behind bars. Most criminals who have carried out such heinous activities at least convey some form of partial remorse or fear of punishment. Not Roby, though. He almost wore his satanic beliefs like some badge of honor. But even in the maximum security prison, even after serving life in prison without any chance of parole, Roby clung to his dark faith. In some accounts of this case, prison guards witnessed him practicing ritual behaviors in his cell. They report he quietly chanted alone, drew strange symbols on the walls with whatever he could find, and even tried to convert other inmates to his warped religion. It is this that we then realize just how lost Roby was. Even in prison, even fully aware that his acts had resulted in gruesome murders of unsuspecting innocents, Roby never apologized for any of it. In his head, he was still to serve Satan on his mission. Satanic cult influence. To Roby, every murder wasn't just a crime. It was a stepping stone on his journey to becoming an immortal figure in the satanic world. He believed that with each kill, Satan grew stronger within him, granting him more power. That's why he didn't just murder his victims. He mutilated their bodies, carved satanic symbols into their flesh, and performed elaborate rituals over their corpses. In his mind, these acts were necessary to complete the sacrifice. Kevin's reign of terror may have ended, but the haunting echoes of his horrific crimes continue to linger. What do you think about this chilling case? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're captivated by stories like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping content. Curious to learn about one of the most notorious cases in Britain's history? Watch this video for a deep dive into the chilling details that shocked the nation.